Well, I'm very glad to be here. I was adopted, and I was actually 18 when I first learned that I was conceived in rape. And I immediately felt targeted. I knew what people said about being pro-life, except in cases of rape, or pro-choice, especially in cases of rape. And I realized that those people were talking about me, about my life. And I felt like I had at least half the world against me, that there's all these people who don't even know me, who are standing in judgment of my life, so quick to dismiss it just because of how I was conceived. And I felt like I was in a position where I would now have to justify my own existence. There's been Gallup polls in the United States that show that of self-professing pro-lifers, 60% make the rape exception. Pro-life people, so I had more than half pro-life people who were against me. And I knew at 18 that I would have to justify my own existence and prove myself to the world that I shouldn't have been aborted and that I was worthy of living. It was actually a few years ago, I had a woman email me saying that she wanted to know what good I have done in my life to justify what I did to my mother. And she said, because I'm just having really difficulty accepting the fact that people like you are alive after what you did to your mother. And she said, so tell me what good you've done in your life. She just said what most people think, and had the audacity to actually contact me and ask this question. And so I explained to her, first of all, I was not raping my mother. I was innocent. I plead my innocence. And I went through and I told her the good that I've done in my life. But I'll tell you now that I know that this doesn't establish my worth, my value. Today, I know my worth. I know that I have an infinite worth, that there was a price that was paid for my life. And I don't have to prove my worth to anyone. I know that today. I know my identity. But I went through and I told her the good that I've done in my life, and I've done a lot of good. I have 5 children. The 2 oldest are adopted. I adopted a baby with special needs, Cassie, who died in her arms at 33 days old. She was precious. I have 3 biological daughters. I'm an attorney. I advocate for rape victims and their children globally. I helped sponsor I drafted this language for the Rape Survivor Child Custody Act to terminate parental rights of rapists. So I have handled pro bono cases free as an attorney representing rape victims to terminate the parental rights of the rapist. So I do a lot of good. I make baby quilts for pregnancy resource centers and for rape victim moms who choose life. We do baby showers for pregnant rape victim moms. We do online baby registries where we maintain their confidentiality. I mean, there's good that I'm doing in my life, but again, I know my worth. But at 18, I knew that there were people who felt this way about me, and so I remember thinking that if I could just make myself attractive and successful, if I could just find a relationship where someone would love me, because I felt so unlovable at the time, I figured then I would have value and people could look at me and say, oh, well, look at Rebecca. You know, this nice, young, attractive, intelligent woman. Clearly, Rebecca shouldn't have been aborted, and then everyone would just see the light, and I could bring an end to abortion in this world. And, well, thank God I am not the savior of this world. And I couldn't even save myself. I ended up in some abusive, controlling relationships. Eventually, I was beat up by a boyfriend from law school. He broke my jaw, my front tooth was hanging. I had to have all kinds of surgery to have it put back in, root canal, more surgery to try to save my tooth. And I was told I could still end up losing it someday. And after 13 years, I had to have my front tooth pulled. which again was devastating. But I was speaking at a pro-life pregnancy resource center fundraiser down in Alabama, and an expert in cosmetic dentistry came up to me afterwards and offered to do all of my teeth for free as part of the Give Back a Smile program for victims of domestic violence. And he didn't just do 3 with the bridge and a 4th to match, but 8 teeth with porcelain veneers. So, and I share this story with you because it's another example in my life where there was something that happened that was really, really awful. But then something beautiful came out of it. And isn't that what God is famous for? The worst evil that man has in store, God can take and use it for good, for his glory. It's a story of Joseph in Egypt when he sold his brothers into slavery. We're told that what man meant for evil, God has used for good, and it is the story of our Savior. And the story does not have to end with the violence having victory, but as we're told in Scripture, God trades beauty for ashes. Well, I'm so thankful for this brand new set of teeth, but let me make one thing clear. That does not make me pro-domestic violence, right? Just like being thankful for my life does not make me pro-rape. But people actually say that to me. Especially on university campuses during the question and answer period. They'll say, oh, so what you're saying is that if abortion had been legal, you wouldn't be here today. Well, you know, if your birth mother hadn't been raped, you wouldn't be here today either. So does that mean that you're pro-rape? People actually say that to me. As a matter of fact, there was a photo of me holding a big sign that said, conceived and raped, I love my life. And I had my 3 daughters with me. And there said, my mom was conceived and raped, I love our lives. And I had about 4,000 abortion rights activists descend on my Rebecca Kiessling pro-life speaker page last May over a weekend. And I, banned and deleted every single one of them. But they were saying things like calling me a rape apologist, calling me all kinds of horrible names, but the new one was rape trophy, and saying that how disgusting it was that I was promoting rape. And I explained to people, look, you can be pro-law enforcement and not pro-crime, even though it's true that without crime there'd be no law enforcement. Huh? This is how people think. You can be pro-soldier, not pro-war, and you can be pro-child conceived and raped and not pro-rape. I'm the good that came out of something evil. But of course, I don't promote rape. I have a friend, I co-founded Embryo Defense, and Halessia McQueen, she's also an attorney, who has frozen embryos, who went through IVF. She fought for her embryos up to the Missouri State Supreme Court. I had Michigan's first frozen embryo case that I handled years ago. It was the 3rd in the United States, the 1st in Michigan. And I knew the dangers of IVF, but here she handled this case, or she went through this herself. And she has a child who was conceived through IVF. And she understands now that she can be pro this child conceived through IVF, but not be pro IVF now. Do you understand that? You can value a child who was conceived out of wedlock and not be, pro fornication, right? You understand that concept. A lot of people apparently don't. And yeah, so I get called these horrible names. I basically, ultimately I've come to know my worth through Christ. I was adopted and raised in a secular Jewish home. People assume, oh, you're forcing your religious views, My pro-life views originally had nothing to do with religion. I was raised in a secular, atheist Jewish home, if that makes any sense to you. They were like cultural Jews, even though they sent me to 5 years of Hebrew school when I was bat mitzvahed and everything. But God was irrelevant in our household. And it was my atheist Jewish grandmother who taught me her pro-life values. See, my grandfather had told her to have an abortion when she was pregnant with my aunt, who's the younger of her 2 children. And a year after my grandfather died, when I was about 14 years old, she began to tell this story. And she said, I never loved him again after that. And she'd cry, how could they do that? How could they kill the babies? I had a face to the issue. That was my aunt who I adored. I couldn't imagine. I was so angry that my grandfather had wanted her aborted. These weren't religious views. This was reality. And having a face to the issue makes a big difference. Well, a few years earlier, my aunt's daughter aborted at 16. When I was 12 years old, she aborted my grandmother's first great-grandchild. But my grandmother hadn't told that story until after my grandfather passed. Maybe if she had shared this difficult family story growing up, maybe my aunt would have passed on the value of life. Maybe my cousin then would have valued life more if she had known that her own mother's life was spared. And so it was devastating to my grandmother that my cousin betrayed her in this way by aborting her first great-grandchild. Well, I was determined at 18 that I wanted to meet my birth mother. I wanted to hear that maybe there was some mistake, that this was not how I was conceived. I was still struggling with those big picture worldview questions of who am I, why am I here, what is my value, identity, and purpose. Today I know that I was created by God in His image for a purpose, which by the way was not to be aborted. Okay, because I was in a church parking lot and I was speaking to this woman who said that she doesn't want the church speaking about abortion, and then she brought up what about cases of rape. And I shared my story with her, and I asked her, she kept arguing with me, and I asked her, look, did God not create me? And she stopped to think about it. Like, what are you thinking? Like, where in the Bible does it suggest that Satan creates children? And she says, all right, I'll give you that. Wow, okay, well, God and I thank you? Like, we're giving Him credit where credit is due? All right. And then I asked her the next question, and did God not create me for a purpose? And she stopped to think about it, and then she actually replied by saying, I just think that God might create some children for the purpose of being aborted. Wow. I mean, this is a safe attitude here. You know, that she felt perfectly safe in the church parking lot to say this. Wow. There's a problem with a lot of people's theology. And I've been shocked over the years to find out, there's a local priest in my area who makes the rape exception. How? Or other clergy who have told women from my organization, they gave them the green light to abort. And in some cases they aborted after being raped, in other cases they didn't. But they've written their stories, how their pastor gave them the green light, saying God will forgive you. And I'm thinking, wow, if you went in and you said you wanted to, murder your husband or commit adultery, is the clergy going to say, well, go ahead, God will forgive you? I mean, we believe in forgiveness, but, you would never say that. Yet with abortion, you have people saying this, that God will understand? Wow. So I wanted to hear that abortion abortion wasn't an issue with my birth mother, and that this was a mistake. I wasn't conceived in rape. I ended up having a judge allow my caseworker to try to contact my birth mother and see if she wanted to meet me, and it worked. I was attending university out of state, and I finally received a letter with my birth name, which was Judy Ann Miracle. So I was a miracle baby. I thought that was kind of cool. And then it had her name, Joanne, with her phone number. Trembling, I called her up. And she told me that she was sorry to hear that I already knew. But then she proceeded to fill me in on all of the horrific details that I was completely unequipped to hear. She's 4 feet 10 inches. I don't know what it is in metrics. Really petite. Single mom heading to the grocery store at night. Right down the street from her home, the guy jumped out of the bushes with a knife and dragged her to a field. And basically she went on to describe for me in graphic detail how he brutally raped her. And that's how I was conceived. That was so hard to hear for several reasons. To think that I was conceived out of a truly worst case scenario, I felt totally worthless, like garbage. Because of people who would say that my life was like garbage, that I was disposable. Then I had to realize that my biological father was a really bad man. She said she had gone to several police lineups and stopped going because she wouldn't recognize his face, but that they knew that this was a serial rapist. And then all these years, I had really dreamed so much of meeting her. I had written poetry about meeting her. My birth mother always has been, is, always will be so precious to me. And so to hear that she had been violated like that really pained me. We arranged for me to fly home and meet her on her 51st birthday. In the meantime, she sent me photos and a letter. And she wrote, "My dearest Rebecca, hoping by now that the shock of finding out all the details of your birth are forgotten. For that was not reason enough of having to give up something as beautiful as you were. Nothing as precious as a baby, mostly when you carry one 9 months and you go through the birth all alone, feeling like no one loves you. But you were so perfect and pretty. All these years I had nothing of you, nothing saying you were part of me, just the memory of carrying a baby that I hoped one day would try to find her real mother, as I always wanted to know my baby. You were always with me in my thoughts, you were always with me in my heart, mostly in July. It seems like a lifetime, I know. When I was sick 2 years ago, I thought I would never get to know my little girl. Would you please see if you can get me a copy of the letter you sent to the Oakland County judge? It made me cry. Also, I would like copies of your poems. These are things I would like to read. It's been a long 3 weeks, looking forward to our meeting. I didn't know how to express my inner feelings." And she put in caps, "It's so great, big, beautiful. It's always been my dream. I'm so happy, I'm crying." And she wrote in closing, "A love that ate at me for 19 years. My daughter at last. With love, your mom, Joanne." That was all my dreams come true. I felt so affirmed, and I felt like, yes, I was wanted. I flew home, had a wonderful reunion weekend with her. The next day she had a huge family reunion for me. I got to meet my half-brother, which was so weird to think we could have grown up together. 6 years later, I met my half-sister when I flew to Florida for a 5-generation photo. It was the 4th time in a row that they had 5 generations of women alive. To a few meetings of Students for Life. I didn't get involved at that point because I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. I was making horrible choices in my life. But it gave me the support and courage I felt I needed to finally call my birth mother and ask her about abortion, because I still needed to know. And she told me the truth, that if abortion had been legal in Michigan at the time, that she would have aborted me. And I said, well, you don't mean if you had to do it all over again, right? And she said, no. I said, well, what about everything you said in that letter? What about when you said when you were sick 2 years ago that the only thing that kept you going was the hope that someday you'd be able to meet me? What about that? You wouldn't have had that. And her response was just, you don't know what it was like. And I know that that's true. But I also know that today she's okay, she's doing great. She has a wonderful husband, a beautiful home, and despite the utter horror of her saying that to me, I still chose to nurture a relationship with her, to honor her for the role that she did play in my life. And frankly, I just hoped that if I could prove myself good enough, that she'd change her mind. Well, by the time she did change her mind about abortion, 6 years later, I was at a really good place in my life, now knowing my value, identity, and purpose in Christ, where I no longer needed to hear that for my own well-being. Right? I mean, we're told that we can love because Christ first loved us. You know, and I had that wholeness in Christ where I was able to just love her. But I was with her when she was making baby clothes for my niece in Florida who was in an unplanned teen pregnancy with her first great-grandchild. Remember I told you the story of my adoptive grandmother? Where her first great-grandchild was aborted, devastated her. It was that first great-grandchild that changed my birth mother's views on abortion. And she said to me, you know, I'm really glad she's having this baby. And I've changed my mind about all of that. 2 days later, Norma McCorvey, who is Jane Roe from Roe versus Wade, that's the United States Supreme Court case that legalized abortion all over the US, announced the very same thing to the nation, that she had changed her mind about abortion after years of having worked in an abortion clinic, after having been an abortion rights activist, yet never actually having had one herself. You see, by the time her case reached the United States Supreme Court, she had given birth and placed that child for adoption. And I think, what about the millions of women since? Over 1 million a year in the United States, for whom changing their mind about abortion means the realization that they will never have that opportunity to enjoy a relationship with that child here on earth. Well, some of these women are my best friends in life. I have women who come up to me and confess their abortions to me. I was shocked the first time. I've been speaking for 25 years. I was shocked the first time a woman confessed her abortion to me and then asked me, do you forgive me? I don't feel like it's my place to condemn you, but to the extent that you need to hear that from me, yes, I forgive you. And then I talk to them about forgiveness in Christ, and I'll ask them, you know, have you asked God to forgive you? Do you believe that Jesus died on the cross for your sin, for forgiveness of sins? Have you asked God to forgive you? And they'll say, yeah. And I said, do you believe that God forgives you? And some of them are a little reluctant, and they might say, yeah. And I say, well, what someone once said to me, that when you fail to forgive yourself, that's like saying that what God did by sending his son to die on the cross wasn't good enough for you, that Christ died in vain. And that's a bigger sin now, to say that what you have to say is more important than what God has to say about it. But I realize that they're not asking me, do you forgive me? Because they're struggling with knowing whether God forgives them, or because they're struggling with forgiving themselves. They're asking me because they see me as being a surrogate for their child. And they think that if I can forgive them, someone who was targeted for abortion, then maybe, just maybe, their baby will forgive them. Because that's what they really want to know. Will my baby forgive me? And so we have the opportunity to be ministers of the gospel. But here's Norma McCord v. Jane Roe, who never had an abortion. She has the opportunity to enjoy a relationship with her child. And I ask pro-life people all over the United States, people don't know the answer to this question. And I'm wondering, how many of you know who Norma McCord v. Jane Roe is? You know that name? Okay. How many of you know whether she had a son or a daughter in that case? She did. She had a daughter. This is not some fictitious, theoretical, philosophical, legal entity called a fetus, but a real person, and a woman, no less, who was targeted for abortion in that case. We cannot let people forget that we're talking about real people, especially in the case of Roe versus Wade, especially in abortion clinics. This is not a theoretical discussion. When I was in law school, the very first day, I had to take this class called Legal Research and Writing, and the very first lesson we were taught for writing legal briefs was something called IRAC, Issue, Rule, Application, Conclusion. You had to be able to state the issue, and then state the rule, or the law, or the principle, okay? And then you had to apply it to the real people in your case, and then make a conclusion. You could be the most brilliant legal expert there is. You could know all of the laws, but if you don't know how to apply those laws to real people, you will lose every time. And in the pro-life movement, I see way too many people, they've got the issue, they've got the rule, and they jump to the conclusion. And they fail to apply this to real people. But let me tell you, it's real stories that change hearts in ways in which arguments cannot. And Jesus spoke in parables in order to apply the principle to a story to help you remember. And of course, Scripture is full of stories of real people. And that's how you remember the principle. And that's how you affect change, because it's those real stories that change hearts in ways mere arguments cannot. The trial date in Texas in Roe versus Wade is in a footnote of the U.S. Supreme Court's opinion. I gasped the first time I read the whole opinion when I was in law school. I was born July 22nd, 1969. I'm 50 years old. It's funny because I had a professor once, I was speaking on a university campus, and he called me out. He said, "You're a liar. You're a fraud." He said, "I know you're lying because I know when Roe v. Wade is, and you're not old enough to have been born before Roe v. Wade." I was like, "Thank you." When I told him how old I actually was, he was like he realized he had backhandedly complimented me, so that was fun. The trial date in Texas was May 22nd, 1970. It was exactly 10 months after my birthday. The U.S. Supreme Court decision was exactly 3.5 years after my birthday, July 22nd, 1973. So I just barely made it. And so did her daughter. So since that time, I've been speaking I wrote a philosophical abortion essay when I was in law school. It's a 43-page essay, The Right of the Unborn Child Not to be Unjustly Killed, a Philosophy of Rights Approach. It's a completely secular piece. I took all the top abortion philosophers, found the arguments, and showed a clear error in their logic. But it's a very sound document. Love to challenge anybody to it, based upon a lot of legal principles. But since then, I was alone for 10 years in the knowledge of how I was conceived. And I finally met somebody else, and he had me come and speak at his church. He was a youth pastor, and he introduced me. He said, "This is my sister, different rapist, same Father in heaven." And it was like, yes. It was so great. It was great to be able to laugh like that. So now, today, I have literally a database of over 1,000 of us globally who were conceived in rape, or incest, or sex trafficking, or mothers who became pregnant by rape, incest, or sex trafficking, who are either raising their children, or birth mothers, or they regret aborting, or they miscarried. Because you have all these women who miscarried after being raped, and their family and friends don't want to talk about it, don't want to acknowledge it. They just tell them, "You should be happy." And they're like, "No, that was the one good thing that came out of this." And nobody will allow them to grieve the loss of that child. So they came to us for connection as a way to honor that child and to be able to give a voice to this issue. My organization, Save the One, specializes in defending all of the so-called hard cases in the abortion debate. But how would you like to be called a hard case? It's really all of the people with the hardened hearts who are the hard cases. They're the tough nuts to crack. So not just the rape issue, but also fetal abnormalities. So we have hundreds in our carry to birth division, people who were told by doctors to abort, or their parents were told to abort them, either for fetal abnormality or for health of the mother issues. They always up the ante, and they take the fetal abnormality, and when they try to bully parents into aborting and they refuse to abort, then they up the ante and they make it life of the mother. Well, with this fetal abnormality, your child could die in the womb, and if your child dies in the womb, then you could die. So they always try to up the ante and make it fear-driven and convince them that, now you're gonna die. Because there's so much eugenics within the medical society. It's really awful. And so we have hundreds of stories on our blog, and we're really a resource to the pro-life movement. So we help to put the face to the issue. We have tons of stories, tons of videos, tons of memes on our Facebook page. At the March for Life in DC, you'll always see us with our pink and blue signs. Conceived in rape, I love my life, or mother from rape, I love my child, or post-abortive from rape, I miss my child, or the ones that say doctor said abort, I said no, I love my child. So you get the picture. And then we always use this hashtag, punish rapists, not babies. We actually have a 5-state study that was done on this issue. It was commissioned by Right to Life of Michigan, Personhood, and Right to Life of Georgia. And it's the only study ever done on messaging, what about cases of rape? Because I spoke in Congress after some politicians had made some unfortunate comments. And I told them that I had advice for politicians on our website. I've been doing this for years, and they said, the Republican Party doesn't want us talking about it unless it's research-based. It's got to be research-based. So these organizations, who are no exceptions, no compromise organizations, a lot like SPUC, where they refuse to engage in child sacrifice, they refuse to sacrifice the life of the child conceived in rape, they said, this is worth it. Let's do the study. So they commissioned this online interactive study where people were surveyed, and we could show they were surveyed at the beginning, halfway through, and at the end, after being given different information, and we could show that we could dramatically sway people's opinion on this issue in cases of rape. And then people were asked to rate the messaging, what was most effective. And not surprisingly, number one, put a face to the issue. Tell the story of a woman who was conceived in rape or a woman who became pregnant by rape. And then number two, then the strongest pure argument was this concept of justice. That in a civilized society, we do not punish innocent people for someone else's crime. Punish rapists, not babies. Now, there's actually a United States Supreme Court opinion called Coker versus Georgia. Again, a lawyer, so I'll get into a little bit of legal cases. In Coker v. Georgia, the United States Supreme Court in 1978 said that rapists do not deserve the death penalty. Okay, I'm actually from Michigan where we've never had the death penalty in our law at all. But Coker v. Georgia, they said rapists don't deserve the death penalty. In a second case, Kennedy v. Louisiana, the court said that even for child molesters, it is cruel and unusual punishment. So, how does the innocent child deserve the death penalty? And I'll ask people now on social media when they're arguing you need abortion in cases of rape, I'll ask them, and I find this to be very effective, do you support a law that would authorize rape victims to be able to pay someone to kill her rapist? Or just her innocent child? Because that's what abortion is. Abortion is a hit. And abortion clinics are paid assassins. That's exactly what it is. And what you would never see any of these so-called feminists advocating to just allow rape victims to pay someone to kill a rapist. I mean, can you imagine today's day and age with the Me Too movement? If someone were to suggest that, all of a sudden you'd have a lot of these guys be like, whoa, wait a second. There's no due process, no right to trial, nothing? You're just going to suddenly allow rape victims to pay an assassin, a hired hit, to come kill somebody just based upon an accusation? I mean, how would you guys feel about that? All of a sudden you'd be like, whoa, slow down a second. Yet that's exactly what they're asking for when it comes to abortion in cases of rape. No semblance of due process whatsoever, no trial, nothing, on her word, go in, and you just kill the baby for someone else's alleged crime. And so, again, punish rapists, not babies. That's the most effective message, and you can put a story to it. So you can say, well, I met this woman, Rebecca, and I don't believe that she deserved the death penalty for the crime of the man who raped her mother. Also with messaging, how often do you hear them call us rapist child? You ever heard that one? Them say rapist child, you say, whoa, rape victim's child. She's a child of a rape victim. And I've had a reporter, when I called the reporter out, they said, well, isn't it a biological truth that you're the child of a rapist? And I say to them, well, it's also a biological truth that I'm a child of a rape victim. But you chose not to say that. You chose to just characterize me as a child of a rapist. And we don't do that. Do you know, in Michigan, so I'm a family law attorney, that was my specialty. And when I started practicing in the mid-90s, they changed the paternity statute to the Parentage Act, from the Paternity Act to the Parentage Act. But the legal definition of the child remained the same, child born out of wedlock. Very neutral sounding, right? Well, in the 1970s in Michigan, like many other laws, many other states, it used to be called the Illegitimacy Act. And the legal definition of that child was illegitimate child. Well, in the 70s, we changed it because we realized that it was very unfair to demonize a child based upon the acts of their parents. You think that's bad? In the 1930s, it used to be called the Bastard Act. And the legal definition of a child born out of wedlock was bastard. And they stopped doing that. That would not be tolerated today. And yet, you're going to try to demonize the innocent child by calling her the rapist child? And we don't just get called that, but we get called a lot of other names. So our organization, Save the One, this comes from the parable of the lost sheep. It has a double meaning. So there's an unfortunate motto within the pro-life movement, in the United States especially, where you hear people say that you save the 99 in exchange for the one. They'll say it's a burning building analogy. Wouldn't you save as many as you can while working to save all? Well, the truth is nobody's working to save all. We've had the Hyde Amendment, which is a ban on federal funding of abortion in the Medicaid program, with a rape exception in it for a couple decades now. It didn't always have a rape exception, but nobody ever talks about going back to Save the One now. As a matter of fact, they just use it like in the Affordable Care Act, we call Obamacare. It has a rape exception, and now you have pro-life leaders say, well, it merely incorporates the terms of Hyde. Like it's already been established that you have a rape exception. Like that argument was determined and settled decades ago. Like that's just the standard now. So nobody goes back to Save the One. What they do is, with this burning building, is they shut the water off and they send the fire trucks home and they allow the building to burn down with the one inside of it. And so whenever I hear the 99 for the one, I can't help but think of the parable of the lost sheep, because Jesus was all about saving the one. So in context, this is what he says. He says, see that you do not despise any of these little ones. And what a strange thing to say. I mean, who would despise a little one? Well, today's world, my people group, are despised. We're called all sorts of horrible things. We're called rapist child, demon seed, evil seed, horrible reminder, rape trophy, tainting the gene pool, monster's child, Satan's spawn, child of the devil. Am I leaving anything out? And by the way, look, see? Okay, there's like no horns. There's no tail. But we are demonized, we are despised, and we are systematically targeted to be killed. Internationally, we are the only people group today that it is politically correct to bash. Yeah, so we're despised. And then Jesus went on to say, for I tell you, there are angels in heaven always look upon the face of my Father in heaven. And then he goes straight into the parable of the lost sheep, how the good shepherd leaves the 99 to save the one. And then he finishes the parable by explaining its point. He says, for in the same way, your Father in heaven is not willing that any of these little ones should perish, and neither should we. So in context, he was talking about the little ones who are despised, who are at risk of being killed. And he's not willing that any of them should be killed, and neither should we. And when you say, save the 99 in exchange for the one, you're saying, I am willing. And that is completely contrary to the heart of God. That is modern day child sacrifice. You're engaging in child sacrifice. You're ready to put that child up on the altar and sacrifice that child just like Molech. And it's terrible that, my colleagues in the pro-life movement are willing to do that. And they'll say, oh, you're taking it too personally. Well, you see, the thing is, I am a person, and it is personal, and I will be taking it personally. Wow. So I hope that whenever you hear this kind of rhetoric, you will remember this. And remember what the heart of God is. So that's where our name comes from. And we say, 100% pro-life, no exceptions, no compromise. Again, we have lots of resources available, hundreds of stories that you can read, memes, videos. I hope you'll go to our Facebook page for Save the One, share it, use the hashtag Punish Rapists, Not Babies. I hope the next time you guys hear what about in cases of rape, you'll know what to say. People ask, what about the young mother, right? That's the other one. What about a rape victim who's 10 years old? First of all, you need to understand that the younger a girl is, the more likely it is that it's someone in the household or a family member who's been raping her. And the more likely it is that it's been going on for years. And guess who reveals the rape? Her baby. We use the hashtag all the time, besides Punish Rapists, Not Babies. We use this hashtag, Rapists Love Abortion. The abortion clinic is their best friend. And if you search that hashtag, Rapists Love Abortion, you'll see documented case after case after case in mainstream news articles from around the world where the abortion protected who? The rapists. It protected and enabled the rapists to continue perpetrating for years. There's a bunch of stories out of the UK that we've had the last several years, how the abortion protected the rapists. And oftentimes it's a girl's own mother who takes her for the abortion in order to protect her boyfriend or her husband or her brother, or just to protect herself because she doesn't want the humiliation of people knowing that she had failed to protect her own child and takes her in for the abortion. But it is absurd to suggest that more violence in the exact place in her body where she was already traumatized is somehow going to bring healing? That is absurd. So when people say certain things like, it's barbaric to force a rape victim to carry the rapist's baby, first of all, you correct them, a rape victim's child, okay? And secondly, point out that it is barbaric to punish an innocent person for someone else's crime. In a civilized society, we don't do that. You punish the perpetrator, and by the way, do you believe in the death penalty for the rapist? Are you going to allow her to pay someone to kill her rapist? Just her innocent child, okay? And then remind them rapists love abortion. It destroys the evidence, protects and enables the sex trafficker, child molester, so that they can continue aborting. The abortion clinic is their best friend. They can't continue doing what they're doing without abortion. And it is absurd to suggest that more violence brings healing. It does not. The other thing with a young mother is the younger she is, the further along she is in her pregnancy. And typically these girls are very far along where nobody even knew that she was menstruating or ovulating. And so she's very far along in her pregnancy by the time it's discovered. And it's not like you're going to spare her having to go through labor. She's going to go through a terrible process where it's a 3-day procedure where you have to dilate her cervix with laminaries. And then she's going to have to deliver a dead baby, whether that baby is ripped apart limb by limb in her womb, which creates shards of bone that can tear into her uterus and often do cause trauma inside of a woman, inside of a girl. Or they go and they stop the baby's heart, and then she has to deliver a dead baby. But either way, she's going through delivery. It's not like you're sparing her delivery. You talk to people and it's like they think that somehow babies just magically disappear, that they just poof, vanish into thin air. And they don't. It's a horribly violent procedure that you're proposing for a young girl to have to go through. And the fact is that babies do bring healing. They have a way of bringing healing. They reveal the rape and they protect and enable her and can get her out of that horrible situation, that violent household, get the rapist prosecuted. Typically, not only does the rape end once a young girl in the household gives birth, but also for all the other girls in the household who are being raped. So if you really care about a rape victim, you should want to protect her from the rapist and from the abortion, and not the innocent baby. The innocent baby is not the enemy. I'll just tell you a couple more short stories. And by the way, I've been able to change the hearts of presidential candidates in the United States. I changed the heart of Governor Rick Perry, who's now Secretary of Energy. During his presidential campaign, he went on national television talking about our conversation, how my story pierced his heart, saying he could not look me in the eyes and justify the rape exception any longer. And Newt Gingrich, who used to be the Speaker of the House during his presidential campaign. And so let me tell you, if you can change the heart of a governor during a presidential campaign, you can change the heart of anyone. Do not be afraid to speak up. Do not be afraid to share why it is that you would be at a conference like this, and do not be afraid to tell real stories. If you don't have a personal story in your own family, in your own life, tell our stories. But do not be afraid to speak up. My daughter, my youngest daughter, Contessa, she's 12 years old now. If you come to the March for Life, and you get to meet her, right? She's awesome. My girls always come with me, and they help at our booth and everything. But when she was 6.5 years old, she asked me, "Mommy, how do you spell the word conceived?" So, why do you want to know how to spell conceived? It's a surprise. I'm writing a book. And my kids, they've known my story. And some people have said that, oh, how can a child understand such things as death and dying? We teach our children at a young age that Jesus died on the cross for your sins. Well, now there's a complicated subject, right? Yet at least we have the right as parents to teach this to our children. They step on a bug and they know that bug is dead and isn't coming back. They learn about death and dying at a young age. And my children from a young age understood that abortion kills unborn children. And they also understand that you have to protect your privates. Anything covered by a bathing suit. And so we put a word to that. They understand what rape is. Somebody touches your privates without permission. Someone hurt Grandma Joanne's privates, a stranger. So they understand this. So this is what my daughter wrote at 6.5 years old. Conceived in rape is not bad because that's my mom. Rape is bad and abortion is bad because they both hurt people. I think, why can't politicians just say that? Why can't they just understand that? If that was your own mother, would you not want to affirm her worth like that? I am not bad. I am not a horrible reminder. My birth mother says I'm a blessing to her. So on my birthday, about 8 years ago, she called to wish me happy birthday and to tell me that my grandmother had died on my birthday. I was born on her wedding anniversary, and she died on my birthday. And we had a long heart-to-heart. I was out to visit my in-laws in Massachusetts. I told them, I'm going to fly home. I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to be with you. And we were reminiscing. We had both been to visit her just a couple of weeks before. My grandmother hadn't been looking up or smiling. And not only did I get her to look up and smile, but I got her to laugh because I sang to her. And if you heard me sing, you would laugh too. At the end of this long conversation, we were about to hang up, and my birth mother stopped me, and she cried out, Rebecca, Rebecca, I just want to say, I'm so glad I had you. That was the best birthday gift ever. More than 4 decades after she had sought to end my life, she went to 2 illegal abortions. And I was almost aborted. She only backed out of fear for her own safety and because it was illegal. I literally owe my birth to the law which protected me. And she made that clear. That was my life-saving near-death experience. And the fact that I was younger doesn't make it any less real or any less significant than anyone else's near-death experience. And it was more than 2 decades after she had been telling me it should have been my right. She was able to speak those words to me. So let me tell you that when you get involved in this issue, know that this is not a theoretical discussion. The fact that we're here today or going through a conference all day, this is not like theory. You know, maybe you might save some babies, but know that by your witness, by your involvement, by legal protection, there will be mothers in your communities who will one day be able to say to their children, I'm so glad I had you. Thank you.